Greetings and welcome to the Thirsty Mage, the podcast that doesn't need a Kickstarter to talk about extra RPGs. On this week's episode, we are looking at a title meant to wet the whistle of RPG fans, especially those who have a particular fondness for the Suikoden titles. Eiyuden Chronicle Rising released on May 10, and we've got 100 heroes worth of impressions. I'm your host, Jordan Rudek, and I've done enough city building over the last week to make me a certified civil engineer. With me this evening is an individual who wishes every RPG minigame involved a pub crawl. That's David Lloyd.
Yes, I definitely would give any game an extra point if it had a pub inspired location in it. And ironically enough, the pub is where I gave up on the game that we'll be talking about tonight.
That is ironic. This game does have a tavern, but I don't know if tavern and pub. I don't know if that crosses off the same box there.
No, I guess it depends. There's a lot of commonality I think between the two, but
yeah,
tavern almost seems more meeting, like less about the drinks and more about the I don't know. It seems more like a community center than a place to drink. I guess that's kind of my thing. Like tavern is when you say tavern, I think of like Dandelions. I can't think of the thing he owns, but it's like where there's a musical or something, or there's a band playing or something. Like it seems more of a relationship or kind of a community thing to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of taverns, I guess, in The Witcher 3. For me, yeah, I see tavern, especially in RPGs. It's being the place where you go to get information, right? Like, yes, there might be people drinking or eating there and hanging out, but it's mostly a place for conversation. I feel like maybe more so than a pub, which is dedicated to getting people sloshed. But a tavern, yeah, more, at least in our realm, when we're talking about in-game taverns, it does feel like the place where maybe something seedy is going down, or a secret conversation, or people just setting things up, I guess. But yeah. I thought we would, before we get into the meat of the episode and talking more about Eiyuden Chronicle as a whole, including the Kickstarter project, today, when we're recording, Wednesday, May 11th, there was an Indie World presentation, 20 minutes long this morning. I thought we would start off with some impressions, maybe games that caught our eye, and just kind of an overall feeling about the Indie World as well. David, you watched the video. What games stood out to you? What did you want to talk about a little bit here?
Well, I guess I would say that the game I'm most excited for would be Wild Frost, and this is the Chucklefish published. It's funny, it's like a deck building RPG, and in the press release that they sent out after the fact, they actually mentioned that if you're a fan of Slay the Spire, you're gonna like this game.
I noticed that. Yeah. So I wasn't
like,
surprised to see it on your list here.
Yeah, so it was clearly like, okay, you guys are out for me. Like you invoke that, and I'm gonna pay attention. So
it's smart because I think they see like Slay the Spire has had like a very kind of dedicated audience, but also like just always seems to be coming up. I guess did they do a lot of DLC or post launch content for that game, right?
I don't even, maybe, like I think the Switch version we got maybe had some of that in there, so it didn't seem as DLC, because I think maybe even the third character was DLC, but to me it was just part of the base game of Switch, so I'm not 100% sure. But it seems to be kind of the go-to, like if you want an example of a deck building roguelike or whatever you want to call it, example of like how to do it right, they always seem to go back to Slay the Spire.
Yeah, so smart of them to evoke that, if not in the trailer, certainly in the press release to media. I that game caught my eye as well. I was kind of watching with my son, and we were also getting ready to go. It's to take them to my in-laws for the day, and then I was trying to get ready for work, so I was kind of in and out of the room watching the video. So I missed a little bit of Wild Frost, but as soon as I saw Chucklefish attached and I saw like the visuals of the game, I'm like, okay, this is going to be cool. I believe that's coming holiday of this year, or at least that's the date range they gave us during the video today. Yeah. Anything else catch your eye?
Mini Motorways, it caught my eye visually because it just like to see how kind of it just seemed very well designed. Like I know I guess it's the sequel to, like, there was like a Metro game or something.
Yeah, Mini Metro.
I never actually paid that. but but just watching it, it's like, man, this looks like a game that's very suited for the Switch. Like
Mhm.
it's got the graphics that look great on it. I can just imagine, like, I don't have an OLED myself, but I can just see like someone with an OLED Switch turning that on, and like the colors will just pop off the screen, and
Yeah,
it looks very. It looks like one of those games where you play it between like big titles. Like if you get
totally.
like a
Yeah.
couple 40-hour RPGs, then this is kind of thing that you just kind of stick in between to kind of you know just to give you that break, like just something fun and easy to get into.
Absolutely, one of those like pick up and play games for shorter sessions. Something that caught my eye, in addition to just the, yeah, like you mentioned, the colors and just kind of the simplicity of it all. Like it seems really easy to get into. I noticed that they mentioned daily challenges and weekly challenges, and I always think those are cool things, and especially in a game like this, that's meant to be a little bit maybe lower stress or a little bit more kind of just easy to pop in and out. I like those kind of things that you mentioned a game like where you want it for a break between larger titles. It really lends itself well to that, to being that, when it's got like these challenges you can pop in, do the challenge, and then pop out. Like I like that kind of stuff. So I'm almost certainly going to pick this up. Going to
That was a
see.
shadow drop too, I
It
think.
was a
Like it's
shadow
out
drop.
now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of four shadow drops, I believe. And this one, Soundfall looks pretty cool too. I didn't put that in my list on the show notes here, but Soundfall was an interesting one. I knew about that a little bit before because PR reached out to us about that game. So I do want to hear how sorry, not Shadow, Soundfall, rhythm game, turns out. But Mini Motorways is one I'm probably going to pick up. Just going to see how the reviews turn out. But
Yeah, and the Oblots, I guess it kicked off with the Oblots, the kind of pokey Stardew Valley mashup.
mhm.
Like that looked good to me. It's kind of like a weird has kind of a weird vibe to it where it's almost like you're growing Pokemon out of plants, and then you seem to be doing like a lot of weird things. I saw like dance numbers, and it looks like some kind of training or something, and that one looked pretty neat.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like it's got a lot of little things going for it. It does seem to be unique, stand out. I know I've heard of it before. I guess this was their announcement that it's coming to Switch. I think it's been maybe an early access or maybe was announced a while ago. It's definitely not a new title, but maybe new coming to Switch. I saw your tweet that kind of attention page, like this is totally a page type game. So maybe I should be able to do an episode
Waiting for that
on
to pop up.
those.
It's gonna pop up. I'm gonna get a notification any second now that it's been added to the calendar.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, those ones are cool for sure. For me, I think the number one game that stood out to me the most was Gunbrella. So Gunbrella is a Devolver title, so it's going to be quality. But then I noticed that I think it believes from the makers of Gato Roboto, which I played at PAX and then ended up playing through the full game later. Really liked that kind of a minimalist Metroid type title. This one, I love the kind of dark noir aesthetic. It seems pretty cool. It's got like a detective vibe to it as well. You seem to be talking to people and figuring things out. But then your main weapon is a gun that's also an umbrella. You're sliding down like ropes with the umbrella part. But then you turn it into a gun. You're shooting people. So looks pretty cool. Again, I know that Devolver, it kind of has a pedigree for working with teams and publishing games that like these that are just super fun and kind of bite-sized. They're not 20-30 hour games. Like they're pretty quick 3 to 5 hour experiences that are really satisfying. So Gunbrella was the number one title for me. And then the second one was Electhead, I think it's called.
Mm.
And this is a kind of puzzle platformer type game where you're some kind of like little robot man. It
Yeah.
looks like you're in a machine or a factory or something. A lot of kind of blue and orange coloring, with your I guess you're conducting electricity, and so when you touch a wall or you touch a platform, it activates, and maybe activates ones like touching you and then adjacent to you as well. Um, and you use that to solve puzzles or to make platforms appear and things like that. Just looked really cool. I think it's a one man dev as well, one person dev, and I saw the fellow tweeting about it today. So that's a game definitely on my radar. Like I like things like that. It looks just fun and simple, and Yeah, I guess just two kind of games for me in the same vein of like they're smaller, they're a little bit more platformer, actionist, puzzle-ish, I guess. But yeah, this was you know, maybe you have the same impression, David, but overall, I thought this was not a great indie world. Like, not no big bangers here. You know, like some good solid titles, some interesting things, but this didn't blow the doors off or anything.
No, there was nothing that really stood out. Like nothing that's like a system seller sort of, type of game where it's
Yeah.
it's more just, a bunch of neat games, but nothing. I can't see too many people like if the Switch had a wish list or something. Like I don't know if people would necessarily be running to add too many of the games, but
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
same time, I would say that I still had enough interest in most of the games. Like there's been a couple indie worlds where I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm never gonna play this game. Like I
Yeah.
have zero
Yeah.
interest. But I didn't have as many of those in this. So it's kind of a, I don't know, it's like not great, but still decent.
Yeah, you know, that's a kind of funny way to look at it. I think I'm the same. Like, I might play, you know, 30 to 50% of these games, and
Yeah.
you can't say that's a bad presentation. You know, when a lot of it seems to be good, at least good, maybe great. But there was no like absolute must play, absolute must download, like add it to my calendar, my wish list. I have to have this as soon as it comes out. I wouldn't say there's really much like that. But I'll give them this. There wasn't really I don't think it was really a presentation filled with updates of games. I think most of this was either new to Switch or new entirely. And I think that's
Mm,
pretty cool, you know, like that we didn't have updates on games, which sometimes we have indie worlds and they, you know, two or three of the announcements are just updates on things we've seen before. So it was cool to get a presentation this morning that was filled with new games and that will probably, you know, again, it's one of those where I'm sure everyone found something here they're interested in.
yeah. It's unfortunate now though that every indie world gets prefaced with, "Was there a Silk Song update?"
I was gonna say I was thinking about that today. It's almost like the the fact that Silk Song is still not out is hurting these presentations because
Yeah.
everyone is going in with totally unreal expectations, right? Or reflecting on it, looking back at it, you're like, oh, would have been great if Silk Song was there. Otherwise, it was fine. You know, like
Yeah.
it's
Well, that's yeah.
unfair expectations, I guess.
Well, that's the thing is like everybody wants to hear about it, and then there's kind of like a minimum level of disappointment that's going to be directly related to these because Silksong isn't there, and it's like, well, that's not really Nintendo's fault. It's not
And
any of
it's
the
not the
indies
fault
that
of
were
these
in it.
devs
Like,
showing off these new
yeah,
games today, right? Like they have
yeah,
nothing to do with that. So like I almost wish like Silksong would just come out already, not just
just
because
get
I
it
want to
over with.
play it and because a lot of people want to play it,
Yeah,
but because it's taking away some of you know, the clout or the excitement maybe
yeah.
from some of these
Sucking the
presentations.
air out of the room.
Yeah, yeah,
Every direct, well, even like regular Nintendo directs were at the point where people are like, "Where's Silksong? This
yeah.
direct was awful. There's no Silksong." It's like,
I mean, they've
huh?
almost had that with Breath of the Wild too. Like, you know, oh, because you haven't shown Breath of the Wild 2, like, oh, this direct was a dud, you know? And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, but there's so many good things here. Like, how can you say that? But and I think
yeah.
it's the same thing here. Like, so many good titles, but um, yeah, there's no sports story, there's no Silk Song, there's no like big, huge, massive, but you must play title. So, but you know, yeah, I think overall fine. You know, not the best, not the worst. You know, very very in the middle, and that's fine. Like, because there's still a lot of good games that come out of this, and um and four shadow drops like that's it seems to become the norm, you know, like it might have been like one or two in the past, but now it always seems to be a handful that we get at the end of every show.
Yeah, it's got to be good for those. Like, it's great for the dev if they can do a shadow drop because
Hmm.
you've got all these eyes on the direct or the indie world, and so if you're like, and it's available now, people are going to be running.
Especially a
There,
game like Mini Motorways. Like Mini Motorways is it basically a sequel to Mini Metro, so you already know it or know of it. So you could look up a review of Mini Metro and be like, oh, okay, it's like that. So
yeah.
you've got that going for it, and then the fact that it's just this perfect like impulse purchase type of game because you know you look at it and you know what it is. There's no need to explain. You really don't need reviews, you know, unless you really care about performance and you worry that that could be an issue. But
Mhm.
um, you know you kind of you see what you see is what you get with a game like that, so a lot of people are just going to pick it up sight unseen. But yeah, that's the so just some impressions of the indie world. Let us know on Twitter what you guys thought about it at the Thirsty Mage. Was there a game that stood out to you that you're looking forward to? Let us know. Next up, we want to talk about the Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes Kickstarter. So this isn't the game that we kind of focused the episode on, Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, but this is kind of the basis of it, or where everything came from was this Kickstarter. So one thing we know about it in 2020, it was the number one funded video game Kickstarter of that year. It had 46,307 backers. I imagine that number has probably gone up since, because I think they do a lot of, you can do funding, I think, through Kickstarter or through like a subsidiary or an adjacent program. Kind of you can fund it after the fact, right? Um, 500,000 was the initial goal that they were asking for, but the project, or the Kickstarter, earned over $4.5 million. So
Wow.
obviously, they saw a ton of demand there, a ton of interest. Yoshitaka Murayama, the director, producer, creator of Suikoden 1 and 2, he's kind of the central figure of this Kickstarter. David, is this a Kickstarter that you backed, or do you remember seeing it when it came out? Do you remember like the hype or the buzz around it?
I remember seeing it. I'd have to actually look to see if I'm on it, because I feel like this might have been one of those ones where it came out and then I missed it, and
Yeah.
so I was just like, whatever, I'll just buy it when it comes out. But I definitely remember, like, if I might have signed up for it. I
Yeah.
can't recall 100%. I've got like 5 or 6 that I've just
You
forgotten.
got to stop throwing your money around at all these crowdfunding things. you
I
got to wait
tried
till
not to
you got to
think
wait
too
till
hard
one
about
comes
it.
out and then
Yeah,
give money to the
yeah,
next one.
they always delay. Like, every single one I've put money into has been delayed. So my strategy is to forget that I gave them money, so that
Yeah, that's
when I
smart.
get my game, it's just like a delightful surprise.
That's right. Yeah, I've got one funded right now. I can't even remember the name. It's like a Pokemon farming action game. I don't even know. Like I think it's something like it's not called Fantasy Life, but it's something like Fantasy Life, but with Pokemon elements. I don't know what it is. I don't know when it's coming exactly. I think they're getting close. We'll see. It might come this year. I'll
Sea of
look up
Stars
the
is the only one I remember for certain that I put money into,
yeah,
and that's
and
mostly because they emailed me today.
yeah, it's also because that game looks incredible,
Yeah,
and like I think a lot of people we know ended up putting money into that one for sure.
yeah.
Um, God, it's really
Did you
bugging
put
me.
money into this one?
No, into this one, I didn't.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I remember I remember when this came out, when they announced it in the 30-day, and I was kind of following their progress, like seeing how far they were going to get, and obviously being kind of very surprised that there were. $4.5 million to earn at the end is very, very impressive. They basically hit I think they hit almost all the stretch goals that they had set
Oh yeah,
out
every
eventually.
single one. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously the game's going to get a bunch of content. My concern when they hit all those stretch goals is kind of like with something like Bloodstained. Are you going to be beholden to this Kickstarter project forever? Like kind of like what happened with Shovel Knight, right? Where Shovel
Mhm.
Knight had all these big stretch goals, and they ended up making these separate games basically with all the different knights. Like, are you now stuck in this uh vortex, I suppose, of always having to keep making more content for the
How
game?
many
So hopefully,
years too? Like, how many years has Shovel
exactly.
Knight been working on on the treasure trove game? Like,
Yeah. It was
it's
it was a long time.
insane.
It might have even been 10 years, 8 to 10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not the case here, but yeah, I didn't back it. Again, just me not having a lot of success with backing stuff, and just the way it takes so long.
Yeah.
The game I did back, just 'cause I looked up the title here, Re Legend. I think it's literally just called
That sounds familiar.
Legend. It's got colon and then legend. Yeah. You probably saw it. I mean, it obviously hit his goals, and it seems to be close to coming out. But um, at any rate, yeah, Eiyuden Chronicle, or 100 Heroes, that Kickstarter, pretty successful. I wanted to pull up something that Murayama said. I just thought it was kind of interesting. This was from his latest update at the end of April. So he says, and I quote, Aiden Chronicle Rising was an idea born from a Kickstarter stretch goal meeting. So this is him talking about Rising now. Um, Aiden Chronicle 100 Heroes began as a project thanks to the support of our backers through a Kickstarter. It differs from your typical game development in that the wait between the title's announcement and eventual release is much longer. Longer still because it's an RPG which can take years to develop, and so the creation of a companion game was proposed as an idea that would fill that gap. So this is me now. So Aiden Chronicle is that companion game to make the wait for 100 Heroes a little bit longer. Aiden Chronicle Rising, I should say, is the companion game. So that's the one that Dave and I have played. I reviewed that. You can check out my review on NWR. We'll go through that a little bit more after finishing this. So back to Murayama here. The development team members expressed concern at first. We knew that Bloodstained Curse of the Moon was released as a companion game, excuse me, to Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. They were both action games, albeit with different directions. We simply couldn't imagine how a game that would complement Aiden Chronicles' command style or turn based style RPG could be made on a limited budget. Not to mention, the companion game would need to be developed separately from the core Aiden Chronicle title, 100 Heroes, which left us with the problem of finding a company we could commission to make it. Natsume Atari was one of the many candidate companies we looked at. I personally trusted them as a company and their plan to create an action RPG fit within the companion game's requirements of having a limited budget and still being fun with a fewer number of characters. There's only 3 playable characters in Aiden Chronicle Rising. In our meeting with Natsume Atari, we learned that we shared the same values about what makes an RPG enjoyable, such as the fun of building out your characters and the joy of completing smaller, less intense sub goals. They also made sure to note that many of the people who will be playing Aiden Chronicle Rising are people who are looking forward to playing a command based RPG. RPGs and action RPGs are different genres, born from different purposes and goals they aim to achieve, but I believe that at their roots they offer the same kind of fun. I hope you enjoy Aiden Chronicle Rising. So I thought that that kind of note or this message, this post from Murayama would be kind of an interesting way to get into the discussion of Rising, kind of just seeing where it came from. That obviously it's not the main team that's working on this. That those guys are still very hard at work on 100 Heroes. Um, but yeah, David, so you played Aiden Chronicle Rising through Game Pass, which is nice. Day one
Mhm.
Game Pass game for you. Um, what are you thinking about it so far? How much have you played? Where are you in the game? Obviously, we'll avoid spoilers. But yeah, how are things going so far?
Well, I'll start with saying I'm glad I didn't have to shell out money for the game because I dropped off after a couple hours. Like it was, I don't know. It feels too much like Natsume Atari. It's difficult to figure out what's going on with this company because they are part of Natsume, which has been around since like the NES era, and they have like hundreds of games to their name. Natsume Atari kind of I guess it's still technically part of Natsume, the main company, but the Natsume Atari is kind of like this independent company that develops their own games. They're from what I can tell, they're pretty much just doing licensed mobile games. So it kind of makes sense based on what we got here because this feels like a mobile game that was made for
Hmm.
consoles. Um, I don't know. Like it's the problem I have with this game is that I can see where they're going with that kind of attitude of trying to make some like an action RPG that kind of gives you this little bit of feeling of character development and kind of just a simple RPG mechanics and whatnot. And it looks nice. Like I think the strength of this game is definitely whoever did the artwork for the backgrounds because
Hmm.
it has a very 2D HD esque aesthetic to it. Like there's this beautiful background. It seems like there's 3 layers. There's like one layer, and then there's like this background layer where it kind of you can see off in the distance. So you kind of see like valley or when you're in the main town, you see like these valleys of forest behind it, and then there's like the town itself looks pretty neat. And then there's like a little foreground or whatever and it looks terrific. But then you see the sprites, and when you first look at the sprites, you're like, well, that's look like any sprites. But then when they start moving, it immediately looks like default Unreal 5 puppet movement. Like the movement doesn't feel natural. It's the it's funny. I watched the trailer for 100 Heroes, and then I went back and played Rising a little bit. And one of the things that stood out to me right away was in Rising, the sprites do that thing where when they're not standing, there's this kind of mimicking breathing, but their whole
Yeah,
body is bouncing,
yeah.
and it's like, what the hell, man? Like that's like my whole body doesn't bounce up and down while I breathe. Like and then but then when you look at 100 heroes, because I was kind of concerned. I'm like, I hope 100 heroes doesn't look this terrible. But I went back to there and like, no, like they it looks terrific. Like 100 heroes looks like a what you would get from the Square Enix 2D HD, where you have like the beautiful backgrounds and it looks wonderful, and the sprites look incredible, and they
Yeah.
they have a natural walk. They're standing still when they're standing still. There's not this like weird bouncing.
You know what it reminds me of, 100 Heroes? It reminds me of what I know we haven't seen a ton of it, but the HD 2D Dragon Quest 3 remake that's happening.
Yeah,
Because you get that kind of isometric or kind of, I guess it's kind of a little bit isometric. It's not, you're not kind of behind the characters' backs. It's at an angle, right? In the
yep.
combat, they're changing that. And then I know we haven't seen too much of walking through the villages in Dragon Quest 3, but it just that it looked like almost an evolution or just an adjustment to the HD 2D games that we've already seen with 100 Heroes. I really welcome that art style. I think it's going to be great. Unfortunately, it does seem like we only really get the background of it with Rising. So
Yeah.
you're getting the background, but you're not getting the really nice HD 2D sprites that you want.
Well, and then the combat is just awful.
Hmm.
Like it's basically you just walk up and there's slash, jump, and then this like special maneuver where with the main character it's just like this little mini turbo that never really seems to like there's a few enemies early on where it's like, well, you can use the thing to kind of dash behind them, and it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't work great. Like I dash and then I get hit. Like the hit detection is awful,
Hmm.
and yeah, and it's just I don't know, like the especially the I think like the first six quests are just redonkulous easy. Like it's
Yeah.
basically it's like, okay, go find some wood. So there's like you first step into the forest and you're just walking from left to right, and there's enemies where you just hit them once and keep walking, and then there's enemies you hit twice, and then maybe you have to walk backwards if they get a chance to hit you, but otherwise it's basically kill three enemies, pick up the log, head back to the village.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, great, we got this log, go get some stone now. Okay, back out, kill three enemies, pick up the stone, and walk back to the village. Like, and it just keeps doing that and doing that, and
Hmm.
it's like I was just like, I'm done. Like, I built the tavern, I built the inn, and that was it for me.
And the truth is, it doesn't really change. Like I obviously finished the game through to the end credits, and a lot of the quests end up being things like that. The town expands, more people end up joining the village as well. I'll give some background on the story of the game in a second. But yeah, a lot of the quests are just of this simple fetch quest like nature. You go here, pick up this thing, bring it back, or some of them are even worse. Like you literally just go to a person in town. They say, "I want a sandwich." You go to the tavern, you get a sandwich, and you bring it back to them. Like that's how kind of low the bar is for some of these. And the funny thing is, like it's sometimes hard to distinguish between what's a side quest and what's a main quest, because it could be the same thing. It could be, oh, I'm hungry. Before I let you go into the quarry, to where your next part of the mission is, I want you to go bring me some food. Like it'll be simple things like that, and it's when you can't distinguish between like the main story and and there's like 30 main story quests in this game. And that should tell you maybe all you need to know about an 8 to 10 hour game. There's 30 main story quests. They're not all of them are going to be, fighting a boss at the end. I think there's only 5 or 6 bosses in total. Um, but at any rate, let's do a little bit of background of the game for people who haven't played it or haven't seen it. So Aiden Chronicle Rising begins with this character CJ. CJ is a scavenger slash treasure hunter type. She has left her home village, kind of on a quest or a journey of discovery type of thing. Her goal is to enter like this the Rune Barrow. The Rune Barrow is a mine, a labyrinth, a set of caverns, things like that, where there's supposed to be lots of treasure. Her goal is to bring a treasure home that is bigger than the treasure of her father, and that this is something that's been passed down from generation to generation, her and her family, that the I guess the kids are kicked out and they're supposed to bring something back to be bigger, more impressive, more worthwhile or valuable
Rite
than
of
the
passage.
previous member in the family, right?
Yeah.
So CJ, she makes her way to this town of New Nevea. New Nevea is, I guess you'd call it like a mining town. There's lots of adventurers. There's people that live there too. And so the adventurers are coming, and those are the people that are kind of making the town bigger. So as you complete requests for the people in town or for the mayor, the town starts to grow and grow, and more adventures come, and I guess you end up being part of this really bustling city. It's nice that you can kind of fast travel between different parts in the city because you have to do that pretty often for the fetch quest kind of things. Um, Eventually you get two other characters, Guru, who I only like near the end of the game realized like he's a kangaroo. So that's where Guru
You
comes
didn't
from,
really.
right? Guru the
That's funny.
kangaroo. I totally didn't get that. So I guess there are beast men and women in these games. You see Guru, who's a kangaroo, but there's also kind of lions or tiger type people that show up
Yeah.
eventually too.
The
So I
magic
guess
pouch didn't give it away for you.
yeah, totally. Didn't click in. Yeah, he wears a magic pouch that looks like a fanny pack. And
Yeah,
he pulls, I guess the magic is it can hold anything. And so he pulls like this giant buster
like a bust.
sword
Yeah, the
looking weapon
Buster
out of it,
Sword.
right?
Yeah.
As soon as he pulled it, I'm like, oh, that's Cloud Sword.
Yeah.
Um he's terrible to use. David, as I talked
I
to David, I
know.
was like, "Oh, I dropped that character. We both dropped him pretty fast.
Yeah.
He's very slow. So David mentioned CJ's abilities. She's a lot faster to attack,
He
but
doesn't
Guru,
walk right. He hops, and
he's
it's
got a
so
hop. Yeah,
irritating.
yeah.
It's
But
so
no,
irritating.
it's keeping in with his character. David is a kangaroo. He's got to do
Uh,
that. He sort of swings a big sword, and you need him to take out the shields of certain enemies. So you'll encounter enemies in like in a cavern or in the field, and they've got a shield in front of them. So you need Guru to come in with his big sword to chop down their shield. Um, his special move is to parry enemy attacks, so he can just block them. So if an enemy swings a sword at him, if you press the parry just before that, you'll block it. Um, so the special moves that they have are more like defensive or evasive. Really, every character has a single attacking move.
yeah,
Um, One of the thing that does happen with the two characters and then eventually your third one, you can do a chain attack. So if you start attacking with CJ and you press, all the attacks are mapped to one button. So CJ is Y. If you press Y, at least on Switch, that brings her in. If you press X, Guru comes in. And so if you're attacking with CJ and then you press X to bring in Guru, you can do a chain attack. And you can do that up to 3 or 4 times, I guess, as you level up or progress in the game. The chain attacks are cool. Some of the animations are really neat. They change a little bit, and you can do a little bit more damage with the chain attacks for sure. But yeah, like Dave said, there's not much to the combat. It's pretty simple. And I get that action RPG combat can be simple, but at least give us some other moves to use, some magic spells, some special abilities to unlock. There's nothing like that. It's your basic attack you're using all the way through to the final boss. You do get a third character who is the mayor of the city. This isn't a spoiler. She's all over the marketing. And she's a mage, and she has a few. There's a way to make some of her attacks elemental based, depending on items you equip. But yeah, that's really the only kind of combat variety you get is the third character having some different magical attacks. But yeah, the combat's just not a ton of fun. David, where I'm trying to think. You said you played a couple hours, and I'm trying to think where that got me to because I found my finished playtime was around 8 hours, eight maybe 9 hours, but it felt like so much longer to me. Like, where did you? You said you built a couple of things in the city. Where in the
yeah.
main story did you get to?
I think I got to the 10th quest or something like that.
Okay,
So I went through the forest. I think there was like 3 sections of the forest, and then there's a boss at the end.
yeah,
And the boss was so like ridiculously easy.
yes,
Like the attacks are telegraphed. There's literally an indicator that pops up with an arrow. It says weak, and there's an
yes,
arrow, and it's pointing, and it's like, hit this, stupid, hit this.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, okay,
Just in
like,
case you didn't figure out that's the thing you're supposed
yeah.
to hit. Like,
Yeah, it's like,
yeah,
okay, I get it. Like, I'll hit it. And it's funny too because like it gives you, so it's like here there's these like lights that come out. So it's like here's where the tree's going to attack you, and I'm like, okay, so I won't stand there. And,
yeah.
and there's like a good 2 seconds of like timing of where I could, have a coffee and have a smoke and a drink and
Hmm.
still miss those attacks. And then
Yeah.
yeah, this like tongue worm thing comes out of the tree, and it's like, here, hit this, and so you walk up and you can slash it like 5 times, and then it'll start to glow because it's about to do its like this little lightning ball attack, which again is like all you do is walk away a little bit and jump over it, and nothing like it does that till it dies like that. It
Hmm.
just keeps recycling that attack. So I was like, okay, whatever. So then I went back to town, and I was getting more stamps, and then the quarry unlocked, like where the actual treasure is or whatever. Like they give you the license or the registration to actually go in
Yeah,
there.
the explorer's license, you get that. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went down there and I went through that a couple times, and it gets to the point where you need to you have to have Guru added to your party because he has the sword that breaks the rocks that are in the way.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's so I did that, and then that's when I was like, all right, like I've played a couple characters now. Like I didn't like Gru. Like the movement was irritating because he did this like very slow hop. Like it wasn't like a walk. It was like these like hop, 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 and then big slash. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah, his jump is really annoying too because I think you can hold the button down to make him jump higher, but it's super slow, and so
Yeah.
like it's not all that useful, especially if you're fighting a boss. I was trying to use him, yeah, later in the game. It just kind of too cumbersome. CJ eventually can upgrade her dash so she can do it in midair, and at that point, I mean, she just goes so much faster than the other two characters. It would just be silly to leave the other two on. Um, yeah, so the tree boss, yeah, pretty easy. With the funny thing, hilarious thing about the tree boss is there are a couple of bosses that every time you go to that area, they respawn. The tree boss is one of them. So every time you need to walk past the tree boss to go to the next area after him or it, uh, you have to fight it again. And it's not that it takes a long time or that it's annoying or anything. It's just like why? Like you beat him once, like it kind of cheapens the boss fight even more than it already is by making you fight it again for like a meager amount of experience and whatever basic item that it drops for you. You know, it just seems like a weird choice. And I think the game is kind of filled with a lot of odd choices in terms of pacing, in terms of when the action parts start and end. I just found a lot of moments in the game where I'm getting started on the main quest or I just about to complete one, and I feel like okay, we're making headway, we're going deeper into the room barrow, we're about to solve some mysteries, and then we have to go back to town again, and you just keep going back to this town and you spend so much time in it, and the game doesn't let itself breathe. You know, it doesn't let the world outside the town breathe. And I get it, there's not a ton of areas, it is supposed to be a more compact game, but it just feels so padded out with the town building simulation elements. And I mentioned in my at the end of my review, like, you know, games like Ease 8 where the town building is not the main part of the game. It is, you're going to keep coming back to it, but you get a lot of meat on the bone before you do that. You're not constantly being sent back to town for tedious errors, just to, or errands, I should say, just to talk to people or bring someone a sandwich. You know, like maybe early on in the game you do that, but then there's this 30-hour adventure on top of that where you're going, you know, on top of mountains and fighting, you know, dragons and dinosaurs and all kind of things over the island. It just does it's just a lot more elegant way of incorporating town building. Even something like Xenoblade Chronicles, like the town building is absolutely not a main part of that game. You can do it if you want to, but it still felt more engaging, just because I didn't have to keep going back to the town to check on things and to check on people. Like it's there if you want it, go at your own pace, as opposed to being really overly much a focus of Aiden Chronicle Rising. Um, so yeah, just to kind of caution people about the game, like I think the combat's lacking. I think that the town building is far too heavy. I guess if you're really into town building type games, you can get into it. And we've talked to some people, and I know there are people that like this game better than you and I do, David, because the Metacritic score on Switch is a 60, which is you know, that's the score. I give it a 6 out of 10. But the Metacritic score on Xbox and PS5 is like high 70s. So there are obviously people that really enjoyed this game. So it might be that, not that we're in the minority, because I think there are people that share our feelings too, but maybe that it's just a divisive game. And maybe you do have to kind of play it or read or see a little bit more to know if it's the type of game for you. But it is one that didn't really work for us.
No, like I just with a lot of games, you can always kind of hang your hat on one thing. It's like, well, they do this one thing good, or they do this thing, or this reason to play it, and I just can't think of any reason to play it because it's like you said, like there's town building, but there's so many different town building games that are way better, and uh, and then with the combat being so bad, like I would never recommend it as any reason for an action RPG fan to play, because the combat is just so basic. It's like if you're going for a game to play on Game Pass, that you're looking at combat, get Deed Light. Like,
Yeah.
it's way better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are a couple of interesting things about this game that are worth noting for sure. Your saved data. I guess if you complete the game, you can carry that data over to 100 Heroes. So when Aiden Chronicle 100 Heroes does launch, which is aiming for next year, with a Kickstarter, could very easily see it slipping to 2024. But when that game does come out, you'll be able to bring over some save data. My understanding is that it is not just cosmetics. I think you get in-game items as well. I think some you in Aiden Chronicle Rising, you have an opportunity to name some weapons that you upgrade, and I think those names would carry over. So that's kind of a neat thing too. That you could kind of customize something in Rising and bring it over to 100 Heroes. So I mean that's a reason to play this game if you are super excited about 100 Heroes and you want to meet some of the characters first and just see a little bit of the world, what's going on. Learn some of the backstory and then bring some content over to the new game. And don't get me wrong, I love doing that. The funny thing is, we don't know if this game is coming to Switch. They've said in the Kickstarter somewhere that if it doesn't come to Switch, the unlockable content from playing Rising or having Rising on your console will go carry forward to whatever the next Nintendo console is that gets 100 Heroes. So I read that two ways. I read that as, yeah, and David, you said as much, that you're not necessarily expecting the game to come to Switch, but also that the game might not come out next year and they might just wait until maybe whatever the next Nintendo platform is to put 100 Heroes on there. um I really expect games like this to sell so well on Switch that it almost makes sense to just make sure it gets on a Nintendo platform at some point, right? Like, that does seem really important. So it was funny to see Rising come to all the platforms, but 100 Heroes is not guaranteed to come to everything, such as Switch.
No, it was just the industry talk we were getting from the director, like, because, well, on the Kickstarter itself, the wording says, coming to PC is the minimum goal. Stretch goals are to add additional platforms,
Yep.
including PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Series X, and Nintendo's next generation
Yeah, it's
hardware.
hilarious. Yeah,
And the Switch was out, so
that's right. Yeah,
they're
this was
not talking about the
2022,
Switch.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about the whatever Switch 2 is going to be like. And so I went into there's an update section in the Kickstarter, and I found a section from, again, from the director, who was talking about um, that comment on the next generation
Yeah, that's
hardware.
right.
And yeah, he was saying that they're working on, like, they want to put it on Switch. They're
Yeah, this
doing the
is recent,
technical
right? This is
work.
a recent
Yeah,
update where he said this.
yeah, and it did not sound promising. It sounded like, it's like, we're trying but we can't.
Mhm.
So it's not sounding great, but
Yeah.
maybe they'll find a way. Like, maybe they have to bring in someone from, like, an outside firm, or an outside, maybe someone who's done ports before, who
And
has
we've seen
experience
the
with port.
impossible port, right? We've seen
Yeah.
things like Witcher 3 and Doom. Like, we've seen games that, oh, there's no way that should run a Switch, and they figure it out. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe they do bring in some help. I could see that. I don't know. I don't know if Kickstarter, if they have enough money or budget to do that, considering they're launching it on so many platforms.
Well,
They're
they
spreading
have a
themselves pretty
publisher now,
thin.
though.
That's
Like,
true.
so,
That's true.
like, and that's always the funny thing to me, is that it's the I, I don't the rules with Kickstarter are so weird, because it's like, okay, so they got $4.5 million, and they funded it through Kickstarter, but then they're allowed to go out and get a publisher. And it's like, okay, so I'm assuming, as long as the publisher adheres to what they've promised,
Mhm.
they can now kind of do what they want, or whatever. They
Yeah,
can
I mean,
add
it's
additional
almost like,
funds, or whatever, add additional content, but it still seems
exactly.
a little weird to me, because it's like, well, that
It's almost
how
like the
much.
Kickstarter is just that, is that proof of concept, right? It's the
Yeah.
thing that can make you attractive to potential publishers, and I guess that's what happened. Is it
That's right.
505
Yeah.
or
Yeah, it's
yeah,
505.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they've been around for a while. They've done some stuff for sure. Um just not to play devil's advocate, but to throw another possibility in. What if there was a Switch Pro that launched in 2023 if theoretically this 100 heroes could come to not Switch 2, but if there's a mid-generation upgrade, you could see them maybe finding a way to get it on there instead, right? Maybe
Mhm.
that's what he's implying by saying next generation hardware. It's not, he doesn't know if that's, the next console generation entirely, but whatever the next big Switch step is.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to see. Like, it makes you wonder when, because I don't think they have any idea of what Nintendo's plans are. So
Mhm.
I
No,
wouldn't look into that in any sense. Like, I think it would be more aspirational, or
sure.
just kind of hopeful of like, well, maybe something will come out soon. It's kind of funny timing because we just had a thing today about kind of a I don't know. There was a thing from Nintendo where they were talking about how they were kind of working around this whole idea of, we don't want to lose. They recognize that the transition from the Wii to the Wii U era did not go well.
Right, exactly.
And they're very focused on making sure that when they do bring out that next generation thing, whatever it might be, that they want to bring the 100 million people they got right now
Yeah.
along with it. So it was kind of funny timing that it's coming up now where it's like, okay, there's talk again about this Switch 2 or Switch Pro or whatever. And now you got like devs like this who are kind of like hoping that something comes out so it'll
Mhm.
be easier for them to port their games to it.
Yeah, what's funny, I guess it was the president of Nintendo who was asked, do you have plans to, release a new Switch hardware this year or something like that? And I guess in the past he had said no, and this year when this question was asked this time, he said something like, uh, not he didn't say no. Basically, I don't know
Yeah.
exactly. I don't want to butcher or paraphrase it incorrectly, but he didn't say no. And so yeah, so there's been people reading the tea leaves a little bit there, whether that's possible here or not, I don't know. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I think it does feel like what I was thinking. You mentioned the Wii U. I was going to say like the Wii U was backwards compatibility with the Wii or backwards compatible with the Wii, but that wasn't enough, right? So
No.
I was thinking, oh, the Switch 2 or the next Switch has to be backwards compatible with Switch, but that's not enough. It should be, and I absolutely believe that it will be. But I think that there's something more has to happen there. It has to be an accessible console like the Switch is. It needs to have that, Nintendo charm that is also easy to explain to people. Like the Wii U, you could not explain that to a layman, right? Like you couldn't show
Yeah.
that to someone and be like, "This is how it works." To get anything fun to have it on that console was just so cumbersome. Rather than like the Switch or the Wii, it's super easy to just say, "Pick up a controller, pick up a Joy-Con, put this in your dock, take it on the go." It's the explanation of what makes the console special was easy. With Wii U, it was not in the slightest, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny with the Steam Deck coming out. I feel like it's a terrific opportunity for Nintendo to have a case study to look at and say, okay, everyone's talking about Switch Pro and what it needs to have, and then you can look at Steam and the Steam Deck and say, okay, well, they're doing a lot of the things that people wanted to the Switch Pro to have,
Yeah.
and now you can sit there and go, okay, well, what's the Steam Deck's weaknesses? Because there's going to be you'd be able to look at that and say, okay, well, they did this, they did these things what that people wanted, but what were the trade-offs, what were the
Mhm.
problems? And it kind of works out well for Nintendo, because to me there's a few things that you can look at. Like, I don't own a Steam Deck yet. I don't think I'm going to buy one just based on some of the things that they seem to be talking about, like
Yeah.
battery life. Is a huge concern that I have, because a lot of the stuff that I've read is that, when you lock in 60 FPS, which is something that I'd want to do, and if you have even kind of mid-level graphics, like, you're basically reserving yourself to about an hour or maybe
Mhm.
up to 2 hours of battery life, which is pretty bad,
Yeah.
really. Like, it's not great. So there's something to look at there. I also think it's funny that, because the Wii U was like this, like you were saying, it's this massive change. Like, you have the Wii, which was already kind of different than everything else in the market with the
Yeah. It
remote
was
and
unique
everything,
for
and then the
sure.
Wii U was this even more unique. And with the Switch, like, they don't have to reinvent the wheel to a certain extent. Like, they've kind of, I think a lot of the success of the Switch has just been that like, there's an appetite for mobile, like, not mobile mobile, but
Yeah.
on the go play. Like, you want to
Definitely.
play your video games wherever you are, and I think the Switch has fulfilled that. but now we're getting so far behind the current gens that, you know, the Switch having the third party support, I think, is what's making it so successful.
Yeah, and especially indies, right? Like we spoke about the indie presentation at the top of the episode. Like we can't discount the impact that indie gaming has had on Switch. Like that,
Mm.
and that is because of the Switch being less powerful than other platforms. It makes it such a good home for indies that don't necessarily need all the hardware power. They just their simplicity, their accessibility, their approachability, all of those things work well with what Nintendo's doing here. You know, Nintendo has always been the masters of portable games, portable hardware, right? Like from the Game Boy, the incredible success of the DS. The 3DS had a rocky start, but it ended up doing fairly well by the end. Um,
Mm.
they've always been really good at that. And it wasn't, there's that big gap between, the Nintendo and Super Nintendo that sold well. And then it was just down from there. Like N64, GameCube did pretty poorly. And then the Wii was almost kind of an enigma um, home gaming, right? Like, and Wii U back to that downward trajectory. So they've really struck lightning in the bottle of the Switch. And it wouldn't make a lot of sense to go away from what makes the Switch so effective as a console. Um, I want to touch on the 100 Heroes Kickstarter a little bit before we wrap up here. So we talked about the Kickstarter, some of the the milestones that it hit, it coming out in 2020, doing so well. Um, other what expectations do you have for this game, David? Like when do you think it's going to come out? Where do you think you might play it? Are you going to get really into it? Is there anything you want to do before you play it? Stuff like that.
Well, you know what's funny is that when the Kickstarter came out, the one thing I do remember doing was buying Suikoden 1 and 2.
Yes, yeah, of course. I
Because
remember
I
that.
was like, oh, I'll play these before this game comes out. Because at the time, I think it was like going to be a couple years. Haven't played them yet, but it's funny. I'm actually hoping with the PlayStation, like that new premium, whatever thing that's coming out in
Yes,
June,
yes,
July.
right.
I'm kind of hoping that it will allow us to play those games that are stuck on our Vita and PSP or PS3 and kind of let us play it on the PlayStation 5. That's kind of
Yeah,
my
yeah,
hope. I'm sure I'll be disappointed, but I'll still hope. So yeah, I'd like to play Suikoden 1 and 2 before. Um, I mean, it looks terrific. The visuals are I think they're very unique.
yeah.
Like we had mentioned earlier, you said like it has that 2D HD look, and then there's a video on Steam, like the trailer, and there's like this boss fight with this big octopus, and I
Hmm.
think it's a very neat perspective. Like you
Yeah, it looks
said, it's
awesome.
kind of above, above and looking down, and
Yeah.
it kind of gives that really neat perspective. It kind of makes the battle feel very 3D. Like instead of it's like enemy on the left and party on the right, you kind of have the party in the foreground and the enemy in the background, and all the attacks kind of have these. I enjoy when there's kind of like cinematic quality to like the bigger attacks, which they
Sure.
seem to have in this game. So it's looking good. I mean, they say the right things when it comes to story. There's always going to be the concern of, it's like, well, if you have 100 characters, are they all going to be properly developed? I guess that's the biggest concern is how are they handling those 100 characters? Like,
Hmm.
is it going to be one of these things where you may play the game, and I may play the game, and we may have completely different experiences?
Yeah.
Like that would be neat, because it would be neat to have that kind of replayability. Or is it just going to be like, you know, we have the same experience, but maybe with a different skin of character?
Hmm.
Like, oh, well, I had this person. Well, I had this person. It's like, well, they're basically the same character. They just had different names. Like, I'm hoping it's not that shallow.
Yeah, I mean I've been looking at the trailer a little bit today too, because one of the recent ones from last year. Um, and I can't believe how gorgeous the combat looks. Like I think it's super impressive when we haven't really seen anything like that from a turn-based RPG, where
Yeah.
the characters are so animated and just flying across the screen and doing these huge attacks, like that fight against the octopus you mentioned. That looks really cool. I don't know if this is just the trailer and they're just kind of hyping it up or something, but it looked like characters are almost in the background, like the background of like a mountain or something, and
Yeah.
shooting an arrow. Like it looks
Yeah.
awesome. Like I hope that it can live up to some of the stuff they're showing here. Because I think the in town stuff looks fine, but I think where it's really going to excel is when they're in these dungeons that remind me a lot of Octopath Traveler. But just the kind of particle or lighting effects that are happening, and the water in this game looks unbelievable. The water looked great in Triangle Strategy, and it's reminding me a little bit of that. Just so vibrant, just seems so
Mhm.
lifelike. Um, but yeah, with this kind of HD 2D style. But yeah, the combat is got me. That's definitely whet my appetite for this game. Like I'm super looking forward to it, whether it's going to be playable on Switch or whatever Switch version there is. But I'll play it. I'll play it somewhere for sure. Um, I guess we mentioned the 100 characters, and coming off playing Chrono Cross, it's kind of funny. I remember during the Chrono Cross episode, I talked about like how I like collecting the characters. It's kind of like Pokemon, and I always end up giving that up at some point. Unlike in Pokemon, where I try to see it through, and I do kind of see that as my way of completing a Pokemon game. In Chrono Cross, I gave it up just because I got to a point where I'd already put a lot of hours in the game, and I kind of wanted just to see the story through. I was much more interested in the story conclusion than I was in finding all of the characters. And this always happens to me when I miss a few characters or I miss a few things in a game. I kind of just put that challenge to the side, or I decide like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just not going to pursue the platinum trophy or whatever achievement would be related to this. I'm just going to give it up and just finish the game and get on to the next game. But yeah, 100 Heroes looks really good. I think there's just so much promise with this game. We know it has that the pedigree attached to the devs that are making it with the RPGs that they've worked on. It does seem really like they're gearing this towards fans of the Suikoden series. So, to your point about getting the first two games when this Kickstarter got funded or announced, I've played the first Suikoden. I was fine. I didn't love it. I was kind of playing it more with a guide because I wanted to get all the characters. I think something happens if you have all the characters and then you carry your save data over to Suikoden 2. Um, I think there's something like that. Apparently, Suikoden 2 is the much much better game. And so I definitely will play that with you if we can play that before this game comes out. I think that'd be awesome. We'll do an episode on it for sure. But that's
Mhm.
my plan as well.
Yeah, I'm sure one of the people or one of the companies that's most happy about this Kickstarter was Konami,
Yeah,
because they
sure.
probably cashed in on a bunch of people scrambling, especially when because it was kind of the perfect storm of, it's like, okay, well, there's going to be people who want to replace Suikoden 1 and 2, and all of a sudden the only platforms you can get these games are going, or
Hmm.
Sony announced that they're getting rid of. So I know that was part of my thing. It's like, well, if I ever want to play these games, I'm gonna have to buy them now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's no way I'm alone. Like, I'm sure lots of people pick those up when they had the opportunity. So,
And
but
I don't know if Konami has the foresight to be this smart about it, but yeah, maybe they would recognize that there's a big Kickstarter coming out next year. That's very much a successor to the games that they worked on. So yeah, like you said, maybe the PlayStation Plus Premium. Hey, Sony reaches out to Konami or vice versa, and they get a deal to get all the Suikoden games on the service at some point before 100 Heroes comes out. That would be
you,
pretty cool too.
you know what would be a real dirty move would be, is 100 Heroes releases and they
Yeah,
can't go on Switch right away for
yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah, yeah.
And Konami's like, "Hey, you can't play 100 Heroes on your Switch? We'll port Suikoden 1 and 2 to Switch."
I think Square has the market cornered on porting obscure games to the Switch. Konami would really be making a bold move if they tried to do the same thing. Okay,
Yeah,
you know what Konami do? They'd make a collection because that's what they're all about. They're all about
yeah,
making
that's right.
collections of
The
games.
Suikoden
They Suikoden
collection,
collection.
full
Hey, come
price
on,
with
you'd
an
buy this
NFT,
if a Suikoden collection came out, you'd
NFT
buy it.
Suikoden artwork for your Switch.
Oh, but please don't. Yeah, that's the pre-order bonus for the Suikoden
That's
collection.
right.
Some Suikoden NFTs. That's right.
An NFT. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I hate to end the episode on that, but the alternative is ending the episode on bringing up Aiden Chronicle Rising again.
Oh,
I'll just say, my final thought about the game. I do think there is some enjoyment to be had for certain people, and we know that just from the critical reception being mixed. Um, for me, my money's worth. I don't think there's enough variety of the gameplay, and I think the town building is just way too much. And I liked some of the later game things where the story becomes more fleshed out. The final boss fight's pretty fun and very very challenging compared to anything that comes before it, which is weird. because you get so many rewards from all the things you do in town. You get experience from every side quest you complete, you get items, things open up, more possibilities to improve your characters. But really, you don't need much of that to overcome the challenges of 95% of the game. So it's a very weird kind of clash there of ideas, I guess. Um,
I would just say that if you have Game Pass, that is where you should play this game.
Yeah, yeah, and again, this is Game Pass continuing to show its value with longer games, or even games that, even 8 to 10 hours isn't super long, but if you can play an hour or two and decide like this is enough for me, that's still you're still getting a lot of good value at a Game Pass from that, right? You're trying out games that just don't hit for you, and yeah, God,
Yeah,
every time
Game
we talk
Pass has
about
been
Game
great.
Pass,
Like for indie, Game
yeah,
Pass has been my indie machine for it's like I'll play 40-hour RPG on my PlayStation 5,
yeah,
and then I'll need to take an 8 to 10 hour break. I go play an indie game on Game Pass, and then I'd play another 40-hour RPG, go back for another indie Game Pass game. Like
yeah, yeah.
it's terrific for that.
It's the best, and I'm getting closer and closer to just buying one early to play Starfield. Like I'm almost certainly going to play Starfield. The only thing that would delay me, maybe if the game gets delayed, probably wouldn't get an Xbox this year. But I continue to say this, but I'm going to get an Xbox at some point. I'm almost thinking about getting an S actually, just because I don't think it's going to be my main console, and if it's just to play Game Pass games, and then Starfield, some of the bigger ones a little bit, but mostly Game Pass. Like maybe just getting an S is fine. Like I've already got the
Yeah.
PS5 for big third party stuff, right? So
My only concern is that Starfield might look incredible in 4K.
yeah, I know. You're telling me, man. Like that's my holdup here. That's my holdup is
Yeah,
that Starfield's going to be awesome, and everyone's going to be praising the visuals and just
yeah.
how good it looks on a Series
And
X,
it's
and then
not that much more. Like I think it's like 150 or $200 more.
yeah, yeah, you're right.
So
You're right.
that was kind of because I was the same thing. I actually when when it came out, I was like, I'm just gonna get an S because it's not gonna be like PlayStation 5 is clearly what it's my number one console.
Yes,
But
yes,
then yeah, I'm looking at the price and I'm like, yeah, for it feels like one of those things where it's like a couple years from now, I'm gonna
yeah,
be like, why did I care about $200? Like I should have just got the Series X.
yeah,
And
yeah. That
and
could
the
be me
other
too.
concern is that there might be games that can't play on S.
Hmm.
Like
At
what
some point,
happens if like how crazy would it be if Starfield comes out and they're like, sorry, everyone with an S, Starfield only works on Series X.
oh, they would riot. The fan base would riot if
I
that
know,
happened.
but you never know. Like it could be one of those cyberpunk issues where it's like you can technically play it on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
S,
Like
but
if it were Sony or Nintendo, maybe. I just Phil Spencer, I can't see him do that. He's too much like he's too connected to the fan base, the
yeah,
Xbox fans. Like he's like one of the guys, one of the gang. And if he betrayed people like that after making the game console exclusive, like oh my
yeah.
gosh, it'd be
Well,
super console exclusive to be only be playable on the X.
Microsoft has no goodwill to burn.
Yeah, that's
Like
right, exactly.
one mistake could be their last. I
I
feel
mean, it's
like
it's
so.
also like their only big name game coming out, unless other than I guess Forza. I think there's another Forza game coming out, but it's
Yeah,
that and Starfield, right? So they can't miss with this one. They cannot miss.
no.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that'll take us to the end of this episode. So we wanted to highlight Aiden Chronicle Rising, which didn't live up to our expectations. Not something we were super fans of, but cool to think about. What's coming next with the 100 Heroes Kickstarter, and reminding ourselves that we still want to get into the Suikoden games at some point, the first and the second one, and hopefully cover those in an episode soon. Fun to go over the indie world as well. A lot of cool games shown there. I'm probably going to pick up Mini Motorways today. Like I want to have that chill game for when like I bring my Switch to work and my office hours aren't busy and I don't have any marking to do. I'm like just play Mini Motors for 30 minutes, see if anyone shows up. So
Mhm.
I think I might pick that up tonight. Um, David, anything you got cooking right now? Any bigger games you're playing or reviews or anything like that?
No, just kind of still kicking the tires a little bit on Elden Ring. I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have the time or energy to get to the end.
Yeah.
So I'm like, do I kind of cut and run at this point? Maybe come back to it later, or I know we have some episodes coming up. I want to pick up Judgment and get into that because I know I think you're working on it now, or
I am. I'm about I think I'm a little over halfway. I think there's 13 chapters. I just started 7 today.
Yeah, so and I saw that it was on sale at in physical copy actually at
Oh,
GameStop.
perfect.
So yeah,
Nice.
so
Yeah, yeah.
might be a good pickup. I was kind of hoping it was on Game Pass
Yeah,
for
I
some reason
know. I know.
because
I remember you said.
Yakuza's all on Game Pass, and so I
Mhm.
for some reason convinced myself it was on. So I wasn't looking really into them, thinking I would just load it there, and then realizing, oh, I gotta actually find this game now. It's not there.
That's right. Yeah, I'll share, I'll save impressions for that game later. But yeah, so we will do an episode soon on Judgment, or as it's called in Japan, and the name I prefer, Judge Eyes, and that title makes a lot of sense when you start playing the game actually. But yeah, Judgment we'll talk about soon. That's from Studio RGG, the Yakuza fellas. Um, we have an episode next week that Paige is hosting on Pokemon like games. I think that's the
Yep,
premise or the
Pokey
title.
likes.
Poke likes, yeah,
Pokey
I
likes.
like that. I poke like that. So what I'm bringing, so it was going to be Dragon Warrior Monsters, but I'm actually playing the second game, Dragon Warrior Monsters 2,
Oh,
which
okay, yeah.
has two versions. I guess a girl version and a guy version, or a boy version. So I'm playing the boy one, Kobe. What game are you planning to bring to the table next week, David?
I was working on Slime Rancher.
Right.
Like I know
Yes.
there's a Slime Rancher 2, but Slime the first Slime Rancher is on Game Pass, so
Oh, sweet.
loaded that up and started playing, and it's pretty cute.
Yeah. You better be careful. We're gonna have to change the name of this podcast again to something related to Game Pass or Microsoft or
That's right.
M with a dollar sign mage. He's get mage with a
Yeah,
dollar sign. It's gotta be something like that, you know. Um, but it's good. Yeah. So next week, Paige will be hosting. That'll be fun. Looking forward to that. I'm actually playing Dragon Warrior Monsters 2 finally on my analog pocket. So I'll save impressions of the pocket for next week as well.
cool.
Spoiler, I am loving that little device. So finally opened it. I saw the
Broke the
receipt.
seal.
Yeah, and I've got it in this hard case. I keep it in a hard case like it's a museum piece or something.
Yeah.
I found my receipt for the for the analog pocket. I gave them money in August 2020, and I didn't open it until May of 2022. So that was
Oh,
kind of wild. That
does it feel
not
like it's
only
free
did
then?
what's that?
Does it feel like it's free?
Oh yeah, I guess I don't know. Like not after I look at that
Somebody else
receipt.
bought it. Somebody else
Not after I
bought it
look
a
at that.
long time ago.
Oh yeah, not I paid a lot of money for that thing, so it's
Yeah,
finally getting some use. I'm happy about that. But yeah, more to come on that next week. So I think we'll call it a night here. So thanks everybody for joining us. You can find me on Twitter at Wristman64. David is David. Sorry, at the Thirsty Mage, or David. You have a different. You have your other one.
yeah. I have
Your
a
personal one.
personal one too. It's at
Yeah,
Filtered Gamer.
that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. So, but that's all for us. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week for Paige's Poke Likes episode. Bye for now.
What?